Welcome back. And here we are in Module 10. This is the re-examination. And this is absolutely something that you need to put into your practice on a regular basis. Draw solid yellow lines around it and make sure that every single patient is scheduled for their re-examination or their progress examination. It should be at very specific intervals. And the first re-examination is the absolute most important. So, what's the objective of the reexamination? Well, most people would say it is to monitor the objective changes. And yes, that's important. But we all know that people under regular chiropractic care, they're going to respond. Like it's just a matter of time. Some people respond quickly, some people respond slower, but the majority of people respond well to chiropractic care. And the goal is all techniques work. That's something I heard way back when I started practice. It matters less about the technique you use, more about your intention, and more about how committed the patient is to receiving that technique. So, if your intention is to remove subluxation, remove the interference from the nervous system, allow the body to thrive, allow the intelligence of the body to work at a higher level, or allow its full expression without interference, that person is bound to get better. It's just a matter of time. So we want to monitor the objective changes. So what we measured on day one, those objective measurements we took, whether it's measuring the ranges of motion, measuring the bilateral scales, measuring the posture, like the shoulder heights or hip heights, pelvic heights, measuring x-rays, the angles of different x-rays, doing a thermal or an EMG scan and having a quantitative measure. Whatever we did on day one, we want to reproduce those tests on our first re-exam to show the patient how they are responding. So that's the first thing. We want to monitor the objective changes. But number two, and I argue that this is even more important, it is a recommitment for that patient about why they started care in the first place. Because remember, the first re-exam should happen ideally before the end of the first month. So at the 4 week mark, so 28 days into care, or by the 12th visit, whichever comes first. So if that 12 visit comes faster than the first month, then that re-exam should happen then. But that's the time to do the re-exam. And by that time, it's common, it's human nature for people to start feeling better and perhaps be less committed to their chiropractic care, to getting that correction. They forget what brought them in to begin with, how bad the pain was or how bad the symptom was. They forget about that because they're starting to feel better. So their commitment naturally wanes. That happens. It just happens with everybody. So our job is to assume, and this is the mentality that we have to have as chiropractors, let's assume that person has one foot out the door. They're ready to quit. So our job is to help them to understand and recommit to the big reason why they came in, what they wanted to accomplish by starting chiropractic care in the first place. And if we can go into every re-exam with that mindset, we're going to be hugely successful and build a long-term, lifetime wellness care practice of warrior patients. So that's really important. Okay, so preparation. This is, again, very important. Why we have set up time for our huddles and why we set up time for our regular staff meetings, again, is to monitor this. So remember, we talked about the fact that, one of our team members had that daily sheet, and she was responsible for monitoring every single new patient. And one page was a month of all the new patients that came in on that month. So by the next month, it should be time for re-examination from all the patients from last month. So we would consistently go over who's ready for the re-exam. So we would know who's coming up for re-exam processes or re-exam time. So we would pre-frame to that person, hey, this is your 10th visit. In 2 visits or later this week, we're going to be doing your first re-examination. So we're pre-framing in the person's mind. This is a big day. This is a celebration. This is a time to check and see how your body is responding to the chiropractic care. So again, it's it's just building value for that re-examination in the patient's mind. So the thing that happens if we don't do that, what happens on re-exam day, person walks in to the front desk and the front desk person says, "Hey, Bob, it's time for your re-examination." And Bob says, "Oh, I didn't know that was today. I don't have time for that." and they blow it off or they cancel it. And we don't want that to happen. So we pre-frame the fact that that re-exam is happening in that patient's mind so they know. So every new patient from the last month should be scheduled for their first re-examination during this month. 12th visit, 30 days or sooner. And we have to remind them it's coming. So it's time to celebrate the small victories in the process. So now we're going to go through the 5-step re-exam process. So it's very simple. We tried to narrow it down so that that re-exam happened in 5 minutes or less from the doctor time. I wanted to be in the room for 5 minutes or less with that re-exam patient, and that included the adjustment. So this was our process. There's different ways to do this, but this was the process that worked really well. We did re-exams and set them up during regular adjusting hours. There's different ways to do it. You can set up specific times to do your re-examinations, your day ones, your day twos. That works. Based on our space, based on the number of doctors in our office, it was just more efficient for us to do it during those adjusting times, during that doctor's shift. Again, it was limited by the physical space in our office because we had 1.5 rooms, if you will, for the re-exam new patients day twos. It was sort of a private and a semi-private part of that consultation slash re-exam room and x-ray room. They were all jumped together. So we had them during our shifts. So what would happen is when the patient came in, the person would be reminded that, hey, today's re-exam day. They would be pre-framed, so they would know this was coming. And the first thing they would do is they would be given a questionnaire by our front desk staff, and they would fill out that questionnaire. I'm going to send a link in the bottom of this page here, and you'll see the link below of the questionnaires that we use. So you can download them, edit them however you want to use them for your own purposes. We gave them that questionnaire. It was a quality of service questionnaire. It asked intentional questions about their goal, reminding them about why they started in the first place, and of course, asking them how they felt they were progressing symptomatically. We had to address that at some point. I didn't want to talk to them about it, but at least the questionnaire addressed it. It also asked intentional questions about some of the other things that we provide in our office. Number one was home care. Are they still doing their home care? Do they have any financial concerns? Are they going to complete their care plan that was recommended to them? And again, we would scan this questionnaire before they came into the room, and my staff member would highlight any red flags. So if they said no, they weren't going to follow through with their care plan, or if they said yes, they had some financial concerns, she would highlight that so we could then address it. So they filled out their questionnaire. Staff would bring them into the room, and we had a team that did the majority of the re-exam. So the doctor's part of this re-exam was very, very minimal. So they would perform the objective testing. We did bilateral scales, ranges of motion, posture, and we actually used a thermal scan for our re-exams. And that would be again compared to the testing we did on day one. So that would all be done before the doctor came into the room. So I would go into the room, the patient would be lying down ready for their adjustment. And I would then ask intentional questions as that person is lying down and as I'm looking at their re-examination findings. And I would say, hey, do you know why we did that re-exam? To check your nervous system, speaking specifically about that thermal scan that we did. And the person would say, yeah, it's to check my nerves, or some sort of intentional answer about correcting the subluxation. And I'd say, do you realize that, and the staff would have already shown them the improvement or changes that have happened in that scan. Do you realize those nerves in your neck when you started all had red bars and now they only have green bars, which significantly on the scan is an improvement? That means that those subluxations are being corrected. Your nervous system is starting to be corrected. And if your nervous system is getting corrected, is your body getting sicker or healthier? And the person would obviously answer healthier. That's awesome. Congratulations. That's fantastic. We would go ahead with that adjustment. So then I would finish performing that adjustment. The person would sit up. The next thing we would do is we would have their original x-rays up on the screen. And I would immediately refer to the x-rays and ask them, do you remember why I was so concerned about this x-ray? Typically, it was the lateral cervical, and we were very forthright at talking about the proper curves in the lateral cervical. And typically, most people would have some lack of cervical lordosis. So I would ask them, Do you remember why I was so concerned about that? And they would say, well, my neck was too straight. Exactly. So if this doesn't get fully corrected, is this going to get better or worse? Of course, it's going to get worse. If you decided to stop care now, would this ever get fully corrected? No, it wouldn't get fully corrected. And if your nervous system continues to get worse, is that going to allow your body to get healthier or sicker? Well, it's going to get sicker. So we would ask those intentional questions to recommit the person to those x-rays. And then, of course, then I would go into asking, okay, that's fantastic. If they asked or answered the right questions and I knew that they were on track, I would ask them, how's your home care going? Okay, are you doing your home care every day? And we would again recommit them to that. Then we would finalize by, in part 5 of this, was just recommitting them to the whole process. And essentially, what I would do is I would try to pump their tires a little bit and tell them what a great patient they were. I give you tons of credit. And again, pre-framing objections. You've basically been here for every single appointment. I noticed you missed a couple, but you made those up in the same week. So I'd give them a pat on the back for all of that. If they weren't a good patient, I would then ask them, how can we help you stick to your care plan better? So we would try to manage some of those concerns or some of those problems. I noticed that you haven't brought your children in to get checked yet. So we would address that at this point and try to set up a time for those children to come in and get checked. And again, I would ask very intentional questions. You see how bad your spine is? Is that something that you would like to try to avoid for your children? And give them an idea or give them some sort of an incentive to bring their children in to get checked. And then basically just say, hey, I love seeing you. I wish I had a lot more patients like you. Is there somebody you can think of that really needs to be adjusted now that you know what you know? And hopefully they would give us a name. And I would say, hey, is it possible you could set up a three-way text conversation? So at least you can introduce me to that person and we can start a conversation just to find out if this is something that they'd be interested in finding out more about. So it's a great way, again, to stimulate referrals. We gave them, and we had a staff member give them a gift certificate for one of their friends or neighbors or family members. And then we would also try to commit them to our next event, whether it was a patient dinner, whether it was a community appreciation dinner, whether it was a patient appreciation day, or whether it was just something, an advanced talk that was coming up. We would try to get them set up for that specific event. So that was basically the re-exam. And then after that, I'd be out of the room. So my time with that person would be maybe 4 or 5 minutes at most, unless there was some sort of a extra need for extra time. And if necessary, we would set up an extra time appointment or we would set up a phone call that we could discuss any problems for that specific patient. I wanted them to feel like the most important patient of the day, that they were being completely cared for and they were receiving 100% of all of our attention. So that was our exam. And then, as you grow, you get your staff involved in doing a lot of these things for you. If you're a single doctor office and one single doc and one CA, then you probably have to do the entire re-examination yourself. But as you grow and get more people in your office, then you have an extra staff member and train an extra staff member to do a lot of the things to make this re-examination very successful. So check out the links below for the questionnaires, and we'll see you in the next module.